Interesting. Very interesting. How Caitlin Clark can say something, the old guard fans, you guys will trash her for it. And then Paige Bueckers remixes the same exact message, and it's either met with praise, oh, I love it when Paige says it, or crickets, because you don't want to be caught playing the fool.
The WNBA Players Association is not just struggling right now. It is collapsing in real time. And here is the shocking part. This disaster is not being caused by billionaire owners. It is not being orchestrated by ruthless corporate lawyers sitting in high-rise boardrooms. No, the league's own Players Association is burning itself down from the inside. What we are watching is the complete implosion of a labor movement, and it is happening because the veteran establishment stopped fighting for financial equity and started fighting something far more petty, a mean girl turf war. Instead of focusing on strategy, they abandoned basic mathematics. Instead of negotiating with corporate discipline, they threw away long-term leverage for short-term factional loyalty. The entire collective bargaining strategy that once had real power behind it has now been traded away for tribal cliques, internal rivalries, and social media posturing. And the worst part, the entire world is watching it unfold in real time on the internet. Welcome to the breakdown. Seriously, get your popcorn ready, because what we're about to expose might be the most embarrassing double standard in the history of professional sports. In this video, we're going to reveal the financial delusion driving the veteran players, expose a stunning hypocrisy that fans immediately noticed, and show you exactly why billionaire ownership groups are sitting back in their luxury suites watching this entire situation implode. But to understand how this disaster started, we have to rewind the clock back to December. At that time, the union was aggressively demanding 27% of the league's total gross revenue. They were authorizing strike threats. They were openly talking about canceling the season. Tension between the players and ownership was reaching a boiling point. Right in the middle of this chaos, the media shoved a microphone directly in front of Caitlin Clark. They wanted her to repeat the talking points. They wanted her to blindly support the most aggressive position the union was pushing. In other words, they expected her to act like a union foot soldier. But that's not what happened. Instead of speaking like a radicalized activist, Caitlin Clark spoke like a CEO. She looked directly at the macroeconomic reality of a $2.2 billion television deal and delivered something that sounded less like locker room politics and more like a corporate strategy briefing. What she said next was a masterclass in pragmatic thinking. And when you hear the warning she gave to her own union, you will understand exactly why the veteran establishment was immediately triggered by it.
I think the most important thing for myself, thinking about these CBA negotiations, this is the biggest moment the WNBA has ever seen. And it's not something that can be messed up. And, we're going to fight for everything that we deserve, but at the same time,
This is the biggest moment the WNBA has ever seen, and it cannot be messed up. We need to play basketball. That is how you make the money. Boom. That right there was pure, unfiltered truth. And whether people wanted to admit it or not, Caitlin Clark understood the assignment perfectly. She understood the most fundamental rule in sports entertainment. You cannot extract maximum value from a product that isn't being played. If the season gets canceled, casual fans disappear. Television networks start reconsidering their investments. Corporate sponsors quietly walk away from their partnerships. The entire economic ecosystem that supports the league begins to collapse. Clark wasn't attacking the union. She was trying to save it from committing financial suicide. Her message was simple and brutally logical. There has to be compromise because the product must stay on the court. Without games, there is no revenue. Without revenue, there is no leverage. It was arguably the smartest and most rational statement anyone made during the entire 16-month negotiation process. But what happened next? Did the veteran leadership pause and consider the logic? Did the WNBA media praise her for understanding the business side of professional sports? Absolutely not. Instead, they went after her. The old guard launched a coordinated public relations assault. Suddenly, Caitlin Clark was labeled a scab. Some critics even accused her of being anti-union. Others claimed her massive Nike endorsement deal somehow made her disconnected from the struggles of the average player. The media establishment dragged her name through the mud. They tried to push her out of the so-called sisterhood. The concept of labor solidarity was weaponized into a targeted character attack against the most valuable player the league had ever seen. Why? because they didn't like the message, so they tried to destroy the messenger. But there's one problem with that strategy. The internet never forgets. Fast forward to today. The March 10th deadline is suddenly approaching fast. Players are realizing missed paychecks could become a very real possibility. Locker rooms are starting to panic. The union is beginning to fracture internally. And then something fascinating happens. A rising rookie steps in front of the cameras. Paige Bueckers. Now make no mistake, Bueckers is an elite talent. But inside the hyper-political environment of the WNBA, she represents something even more important. She's part of the establishment's inner circle. She comes from the legendary University of Connecticut pipeline. The veterans respect her. The media protects her. She is deeply embedded inside the league's most powerful basketball network. So when Bueckers sat down for an interview to talk about the exact same labor crisis, people were paying attention. And when you hear the words she used, you will immediately notice something shocking. Because what she said next sounded almost identical to what Caitlin Clark said 3 months earlier.
Implemented for us to move on our stance. And so we as players, we don't want to strike. We want to have a season. I love playing basketball. That's all I want to do. But again, there's things that need to be handled, and we want to do it as professionals. At this point,
we do not want to strike. We want to have a season. I love playing basketball. We want to handle this as professionals. Stop the tape. That is the exact same message. Not similar. Not close. The exact same philosophy that Caitlin Clark delivered 3 months earlier. Paige Bueckers was openly advocating for compromise. She was saying a strike would hurt the business. She was emphasizing that the league needs games on the court. In other words, she was repeating the same macroeconomic logic Clark had already explained back in December. So what happened next? Where was the outrage? Where were the angry tweets from veteran players accusing her of breaking union solidarity? Where were the think pieces from WNBA media figures calling her a scab? They were nowhere to be found. Instead, the response was silence. Absolute, deafening silence. The veteran establishment suddenly had nothing to say. The same media voices that spent weeks attacking Caitlin Clark completely swallowed their tongues. And that's when the internet noticed something. The double standard was impossible to ignore. Fans immediately started pointing it out. Social media exploded with commentary calling out the hypocrisy. Clips started circulating online comparing the two statements side by side. And suddenly the public narrative began shifting. Because once the internet gets involved, the accountability becomes unavoidable. Fans started asking a very simple question. Why was Caitlin Clark attacked for saying something that Paige Bueckers was now being praised for? And that question opened the door to a much bigger conversation about what was really happening behind the scenes in the WNBA power structure.
CC literally said this in December. Precious P can't even come up with her own thoughts. Quote, she's racist and a scab. It's okay when she says it, but not when Caitlin does.
Fans quickly started pointing out the obvious. Caitlin Clark said this exact thing back in December, and she was dragged across the internet for it. Some critics called her a scab. Others went even further, throwing accusations and personal attacks that had nothing to do with basketball. But when Paige Bueckers delivered the same message, suddenly it was acceptable. Suddenly it was reasonable. And just like that, the illusion shattered. Because in that moment, the WNBA Players Association lost the moral high ground. The mask slipped completely, and fans realized something uncomfortable. This was never just about labor theory or union solidarity. It was about internal politics. Inside the league, certain voices were protected while others were targeted. If you were part of the inner circle, you could call for compromise and be praised. But if you were Caitlin Clark, the league's biggest superstar, you could be thrown directly to the wolves. And while all of this was unfolding publicly, the billionaire ownership groups were watching very carefully. From their perspective, this was a strategic goldmine. Because instead of negotiating with a unified labor force, they were watching the union tear itself apart. The internal divisions were being exposed in real time. The players were publicly contradicting each other. And in corporate warfare, when your opponent abandons discipline for emotional infighting, the outcome becomes predictable. You win. But the hypocrisy wasn't even the most shocking part of this entire situation. If you really want to understand why ownership suddenly stopped taking the union seriously, you have to look at the financial arguments some veteran players started making during negotiations. Because when those arguments hit the public stage, they revealed something that stunned even longtime sports business analysts. The level of financial delusion was almost unbelievable. Recently, ownership presented a counterproposal that included a major increase to the salary cap. Under the new structure, many veteran role players would receive raises approaching $200,000 per year. Let that sink in for a moment. A $200,000 annual raise for players who were previously making around $90,000. In almost any industry on Earth, that would be considered a life-changing financial victory. You pop champagne, sign the contract, and secure the bag. But instead, veteran guard Natasha Cloud grabbed a microphone. And what she said next left even neutral observers completely stunned.
Also be taken off of the table. You all know this New York market. that $200,000 jump that players are going to make, that's before taxes, that's before what they would have to pay for a potential housing market in the state of New York.
Natasha Cloud argued that the $200,000 salary increase wasn't enough because it comes before taxes and before housing costs in New York. Stop the tape. Welcome to planet Earth. Every working adult in the United States pays taxes. Every employee living in New York City pays rent. That is not some unique burden placed on WNBA players. That is basic economic reality. So when a professional athlete publicly complains that a $200,000 raise is insufficient because the IRS exists, people start asking serious questions about financial literacy. And this moment revealed exactly why negotiations suddenly stalled. Because what Cloud was essentially demanding was something far beyond a salary increase. She was asking ownership groups not only to dramatically raise player salaries, but also to subsidize their entire lifestyle. Housing costs, taxes, personal expenses. That's not how professional sports contracts work. It's not how the NBA operates either. LeBron James does not ask the Los Angeles Lakers to pay his property taxes. Patrick Mahomes does not request the Kansas City Chiefs to cover his mortgage. Professional athletes negotiate gross salaries. After that, they handle their own taxes and manage their own finances. That's the standard across every major league in the world. But some WNBA veterans were demanding to be treated like elite corporate assets, while simultaneously complaining like teenagers receiving their first paycheck. Imagine being a billionaire owner, sitting at that negotiation table. You run global investment funds. You employ armies of accountants and financial analysts. And across the table, a professional athlete is arguing that a $200,000 raise isn't enough because they still have to pay rent. At that moment, negotiations freeze. Because you cannot negotiate revenue percentages with someone who doesn't fully understand how income taxes work. Meanwhile, a new generation of players, Caitlin Clark, Paige Bueckers, and others, clearly understand the real equation. They know the product must stay on the court. Fans must be entertained. Television partners must be satisfied. They are ready to act like professionals and sign a compromise. But the veteran establishment is terrified of something else entirely: losing control. They are clinging to a negotiation strategy that simply does not align with economic reality. And if the March 10th deadline arrives without a deal, the consequences could reshape the entire future of the league. So now the question turns to you. Do you think the media treated Caitlin Clark unfairly compared to Paige Bueckers? Do you believe Natasha Cloud's comments exposed a serious misunderstanding of how professional sports finances actually work? And most importantly, will the new generation of players step in and force a deal before the season is put at risk? Drop your honest thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more deep breakdowns about the business, politics, and power struggles shaping professional sports, make sure you subscribe to Court Queens, hit the like button, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next analysis. Because on this channel, we don't just talk about the game. We expose the strategy behind it. And trust me, this story is far from over.